You're listening to the Kingdom Leadership Advantage podcast with Dionne van Zyl. Today, we're joined by special guest Theresa Cook, co-owner of Brilliant Perspectives. As a leader passionate about building a business that reflects God's beauty, Theresa shares her journey of learning to lead with kingdom principles. If you've ever wondered what it means to truly integrate the Father's heart into your business and leadership, this episode is for you. Let's dive in.
Well, Theresa, this is so much fun. I'm so glad we're getting to do this podcast together. We've been working together for a while. We're also business partners in our School of Leadership, which is great. But today I really want to focus on your journey specifically as a business owner, as a kingdom business owner. I know that you and your husband, Graham, own a company called Brilliant Perspectives. And for those who don't know you, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little of your story and how we got here?
Well, for those of you who don't know, I am Theresa Cook. I'm married to Graham. Probably everybody listening to this podcast will have heard or seen Graham before. And Graham and Dionne, you said something that was really powerful because we don't just run a business, we run a kingdom business.
Right.
And it needs to be brilliant because it really needs to represent who the Father is and what we feel like the permission and the authority that the Father's given us from the kingdom to bring here on earth. So everything that we do in Brilliant is always through the lens of, is this kingdom? Is it brilliant? Is it beautiful? Does it represent the beauty of who God is in the kingdom that we get to live on earth? So that's really our story with Brilliant. And of course, how we got started with the Cooks and Van Zyls. I think some of you may know this story. To me, it's really precious because, you come through a time in life where you recognize as a leader that you don't wear every hat in the company, and you have strengths, you have weaknesses, and you have limitations. And I think we had gotten to a place where we knew that Brilliant needed to go to another level. It needed to expand. And I think we recognized that we were not the ones to do that. And we had known Dionne and Bridget for several years at this point, and saw how Dionne ran his business. And it really was a beautiful fit, a beautiful dovetail between Graham and Dionne and how they work. And so we were actually very blessed. An unfortunate time for Dionne, but a very benefit time for us, because for the first time we would have never been able to pull you out of what you were doing and have you join Brilliant, because we were just a little company. Even though we do big stuff, we're a small company. But we knew that we needed somebody who understood big stuff and could, kind of help us with that process. So.
Oh, that's amazing. I don't think people realize, even though you're a small company at Brilliant Perspectives, that you have such a massive footprint, subscribers in over 70 countries and the church, working with over 20 people in 28 countries and so on. And I don't know how many countries Graham has actually spoken in or how many countries you and Graham have traveled to. But I think just watching this huge footprint, how do you do that much with such a small team? Because most people think that as the business grows in complexity and in reach, that by necessity, it also has to grow in the number of people that run it.
Yeah, good question. I think is that you do what you see the Father doing. And we are and will never be the type of people in our personal life, and definitely not in our business life, where we keep up with the Joneses. We keep up with what the Father puts before us and the permission that he lays out. And we go after that territory in whatever way that he directs us to do that. And a lot of times it's counterculture to a business world because you have to go do it. And we're about our Father's business. And I think that's the beauty with having a kingdom culture in a business, and not I don't want to say worldly, but a secular culture or even a church culture sometimes will try and do every single thing. And sometimes they're missing the thing, trying to get to everything.
Yeah.
So I think for us, it's about really doing what we do, doing it to represent the beauty of who the Father is, and we go after what we see the Father do. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that intense focus on the one thing. Paul said, "This one thing I do." I think many leaders say, "These 10 things I do." And
Yeah.
so
Yes.
the one thing you do, and you brought up a second point. You have the unique situation that you have an entire company full of kingdom people. I mean, that's rare. Not everyone has that.
Yeah.
Some of them might be believers, but to have true kingdom people.
Yeah.
So to you, you've worked in various scenarios and been in various, organizations,
Mhm.
but what's the delight of that for you? What is the being in a group of all kingdom, and are there any challenges associated with that?
That's a really good question. I'd like to start with my first experience with a kingdom business. I worked at a school with severely emotionally disturbed children. We're talking 4-year-olds to 22.
Wow.
And every day was a battleground. I mean, we were all trained in professional assault. The language was so thick you could cut it. If you could find a knife big enough, you might be able to cut the language. And it was one of the most beautiful jobs I've ever had because it was ran in a kingdom culture. So the principal of our school used kingdom principles. We don't look at someone's behavior. We look at their identity. We don't call them out on their stuff. We call them up into their identity. Did we have to address those things? Absolutely. But that was never our starting place. And most of the teachers were pre-Christians, but they got the same, they were treated the same as the Christians. There is no difference. There isn't in the eyes of God. He doesn't treat someone who knows him and someone who doesn't know him any different. And he doesn't withhold his blessing from them either. Your blessings might be limited because you don't know how to access them, but he won't withhold them just because you don't choose him. And so watching on this campus, we had staff just getting saved because we were introducing them to who Jesus was. We spoke to them the same way we would Jesus. And same thing with our children. Our children were having dreams and visions, and they were getting saved, going, this man in white came to me and he told me how much he loved me. And like our kids were getting set free, and we never said the name Jesus. So the kingdom will operate where you allow it. And so are there difficulties back and forth with working with Christians and pre-Christians? Of course, and the same thing if everybody, like with us, everybody is a Christian. But the reality is we're human and we're all practicing on each other. So when you learn not to hold each other hostage, when you learn that someone is in a new learning curve and they're making mistakes, and there's grace and there's mercy for that. When you learn that you can trust your team, because even if you make a mistake, your team is members is going to see the best in you and call you up and say, it's okay. We'll do it again. We'll We'll figure it out. We'll do it again.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So what was a pivotal moment for you, in your own journey that really significantly impacted your approach to leadership?
Really, I was probably 8 or 9 years old. There was a little grandma around the corner named Mrs. Spitzka, and she would brush my hair and tell me that God loved me. I was set aside. He had a plan for me. He had purpose for me. I didn't understand any of that as a child, but that's how I chose to see other people. And that's still today how I choose to see people, is that there's something bigger in you than you recognize. You're more beautiful than you think you are. And so that's just how I operate in all of my relationships. And I think people respond to that because I don't hold them hostage to, I want to see them through the lens that Jesus sees them.
Yeah.
And so when you do that with somebody, it will automatically raise their bar, So at Brilliant, we say, we call people up and not call people out. And there is that process. You can't be doing this because this is the way that God sees you. And I think a really pivotal point for me, again, was at this school. I had a group of teenage boys, 2 girls, again, sometimes of violent situations. And they were all really street kids, all from different gangs, and they were not friends on the street. But in my class, we spoke to the treasure in them, and it called them up to a new way of seeing themselves and the person sitting next to them. And so in my class, they were a team because they saw the treasure in them. I didn't have to say, well, God, this is what God sees in you. So I think when you call people up in their identity as a leader, people will follow, whether it's in work or life, anywhere in your life. People want to grow up. People already know what they're doing wrong. We don't need to point that out. What we do get to do as leaders is we get to establish a space where they can envision themselves as someone bigger and better so that they can see a way forward. I don't have to do this anymore. I can practice that. Yeah. And then we help people with grace and mercy in practicing that until they become it. So I think when you open up a space of kindness and graciousness and gentleness, people can start seeing a way forward, and they start seeing how big they can be in that space instead of how small they are in the space that they're stuck in. And that's a perfect way of getting people unstuck.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful kingdom leadership thing, because you really are being prophetic. You're making your leadership prophetic because you're speaking to them one step above when you speak to the treasure in them. But I think some business leaders might listen to this and say, well, I don't have time for all that. We have a very busy schedule. We've got stuff to do, products to deliver, customers to reach, and so on. What is your answer to that?
Yeah, they're right? Because I know a lot of people, business leaders, especially men, will listen to me and go, that's all really pretty, all this beauty, but, we got to get the job done. Right. And you're absolutely right. But when you get the job done, what is the outcome you're looking for? Are you looking for getting the job done, or are you looking for getting the job done on this level because you practice kingdom principles? So you didn't just get the job done. In the process of doing the job, you used the tools that walked you up. Kingdom ladder is not the right word, but you walked up these stair steps that led you to a higher outcome than what you originally planned. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of tools. And Dionne, of course, you teach us amazing tools, with the Q book and what does done look like, and all the tools that you teach us and in your leadership courses of how to open up a wide space when your time is very short and tight. And it actually, I think, expands the time when you use the right tools. So
that's really interesting, because what I hear you saying is that kingdom leadership is not a single dimension. It's two-dimensional. On the one dimension, it's execute and get stuff done. On the other, let's call it the y-axis, it's what height did those people land at? Did you use the execution to also invest in the people? Because that compounds over time, right? I mean, at some point, they start to believe what you believe about them.
Yeah.
And then everything shifts.
Well, you're right. And you build something so much bigger, which is why we do such big things when it's in a small company, is because anybody can get to the other side. The question is, who do you want to be and who do you want your team to be? So if you allow your team to walk through that process, and again, when you use the right tools, it actually multiplies your time. So you actually get more done in a tighter, a narrow space. And then your team becomes stronger, more confident. You're building. By the time you get up here, you've built something and finished the task at the same time. So you've actually multiplied your business just with growing character development in your people and in your processes.
For sure. That was so well put. And Brilliant has the hard data to prove it.
Yes, we do.
So I think in the first year or two, Brilliant ended up increasing productivity by about 500% and with about half the size of the team. So, and I think it's just continued to grow from then. We should probably measure it again at some point, but I know we had interesting ways of measuring and coming up with that metric. But you've been part of that journey, the before and after.
Yeah.
So you can be a kingdom person, let's call it upstairs kingdom person, but the downstairs execution isn't good. then you end up being like a triangle, all upstairs,
Yeah.
small downstairs, or you can be all downstairs and very small upstairs. How do we turn those triangles into squares? Good at the upstairs, good at the downstairs. What has that journey been for you?
It's been a journey. It's been a journey because, when I came on, we were top heavy with staff, not getting a whole lot done. Now it's the other way around. For me, that journey has been a journey because I walked into our business as an actual team member. Even though I'm a business owner, I wear, several hats. And so, but as a team member, I really was on the bottom line. I mean, when I first started at Brilliant, I didn't know how to send an email. I didn't know how to cut and paste. I didn't know a lot. And so I'm listening to people who have been trained and they've been educated and they're very skilled in what they're doing. And I'm just trying to keep up with the language, well alone the process. I think that, again, goes back to, what do you want your team to look like? Our team has been very, not always, but it is now, the team we have now has always been very gracious with my learning curve. And now I've worked really hard because my team has given me a wide open space to learn, grow, and develop, and to hold my hand when I've needed it or walk before me when I've needed it and to follow in the footsteps. And now I rarely need what I needed, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And that's been my whole goal, is to be fully, not to be a drain on my company and not to be one of those employees that I'm an asset to my own company.
So that's a really interesting scenario, because on the one hand, you're the owner of the company. On the other hand, you're not a member of the company reporting to some leader that you've helped install or, running the company for you. And at the same time, you're learning all these tools yourself, not having a background for it. I know that at Brilliant, there are Gen Zs and there's people in their 60s and 70s and everyone in between. So that means especially older people struggle with some of the tech, some of the concepts, because you run a virtual online technology platform. And although you're very clear on your theology and on your kingdom teaching, so can you comment on both of those, your downstairs tools that you had to learn? Yeah. And what are the ones that have really helped you, that you feel like, wow, that's really helped? And then I'll ask you to do the same for the upstairs. What refinement has there come in your teaching, your presentation, and your skill, if you like, as a leader, teacher?
Yeah. Well, I think that's had a lot of different layers to it. So I'm thinking back because, we started out this conversation saying that everything starts with what is the Father doing? So getting the picture and then figuring out the pieces that you need, bringing that picture downstairs to make sure that you have the tools that you need to build, to bring it upstairs. Initially, I didn't have any of those downstairs skills. So for me, what I have used that's been great has been, the Q book, writing everything down. It's my control station. What does done look like? Practicing, delight and not going after discipline. That's a big one. If you're a business owner and you're listening to this is, if you could learn this one key, because most people spend a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to discipline themselves to get something done. But the Bible says that if you delight yourself in the Lord, and all these things will be added unto you. So if you practice with delight and say, Father, there is something delightful in this process that I don't see, I don't get, I don't understand, I don't like, it doesn't feel good, whatever the situation is, it's difficult for me. All you need is one piece of delight and everything will open up and you will get to it. So the practice of delight has been huge for me because it's been such a difficulty with technology. And I've had to just say, I'm going to practice delight because I know that in a year from now, this won't be a struggle for me. In a year from now, I will have finished this project, but I will have not just finished the project. I will have grown in the process and I will become a better employee, a better person. I'll be more peaceful. And so, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was a good answer. Yeah, no, I
yeah.
appreciate that. And well, let's talk for a second. You talked earlier about this duality of your business life, where on
Yes.
the one hand you're the owner, and the other hand you're a team member reporting to someone who's reporting to the owner, which is you. So,
Mhm.
so this is like a circular. How does that work? I mean, what tools do you use to help you stay and keep the structure of that in a way that makes sense and doesn't feel weird to all the people involved?
This is another one, especially if it's a family business. Such an important tool to have is that we all wear different hats. So I'm married to Graham. Him and I are owners, but I don't work for him. I work with him. So there are times when I have to have a conversation with Graham. I make it very clear. I'm putting on my wife hat. I'm putting on my coworker hat. I'm putting on my owner hat. And of course, all of us, there's so many family members on our team. You know, my best friend is my boss. She's also my coworker. You know, there are areas, all of us on the team, which is why having a team of leaders and not one leader is so important. Staying in your own lane and allowing that person the honor and the respect of what their job is and their leadership role in that particular project. So even if I'm on a team with somebody else, my hat is I serve them because I want them to be the hero of that story, even if I feel like I would do that project differently. So I put on the hat of I am your coworker, but that person's wearing the hat of I am your team leader. And so it's the same thing with all of us, you know, when you know what hat you're wearing. Okay, I'm wearing my friend hat right now, which is a totally different conversation than I'm wearing my coworker hat.
Yeah.
Because then you're collaborating. But then, you know, you've been collaborating with someone for 15 years and now all of a sudden you're their boss or they're the lead. And now you're saying, okay, I'm not asking for collaboration because I'm putting on my leader hat. And so I think the whole team does that really well because we're always taking turns in leading different projects. And so our roles are always changing. So we have to constantly be changing those hats. But it's really important when you have a family business and everybody is friends and family.
Yeah. No, I love that.
It keeps it
Takes so
clear
much.
and it keeps it
Yeah.
clean. Everything
Yeah.
is clean. I don't have to,
Yeah.
nothing is muddled. Everything is very,
That's huge.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's freeing, you know. I think it
Oh my
creates a lot
gosh.
of relational space because I remember Henry Cloud once telling a story about a father's walking through
Yeah.
this guy's CEO's walking through the factory, and he sees his son berating one of the older foremen or one of the older, you know, managers, and just humiliating him in front of the other workers. And he calls his son into the office and he says, "Okay, son, look, we've talked about this before. I've sent you on courses. I've tried to help you, but I will not have that in our culture. So in this company, I wear two hats. On the one hand, I'm your dad. On the other hand, I'm the CEO. So I'm going to put my CEO hat on and say, okay, we won't have that in our culture. You're fired. Hang on a second. Switched hats. It says, as your dad, hey, son, I heard you lost your job today. How can I help? And there's so much health in that. It creates so much relational space in that conversation
Mhm.
because they don't have to bleed.
Yeah.
And I know that when you wear the one hat, you have to pretend the other hats don't exist. So when you're with Graham and you're putting on your, you know, owner hat, you have to act as though you're not the wife,
Yeah.
you know, or whatever it is. And there are times, I know that when we've talked, there was a time we had that relationship where,
Huh?
you know, that complicated. We used to switch hats all the time. Okay, I'm speaking to you now with your owner hat on. You need to know this, you know, and then you went to team member mode. So, but it worked very well. I at least from my point of view, did it work for you? I mean, what was your experience of that?
It worked really well because I remember we would just when you would come into town, we would, because I wasn't really officially part of the team, so we would like put all the whole conversation would just be in one pile, and once we separated that pile into hats, the conversations were a lot smoother and a lot clearer, and I knew how to navigate what you were needing from me. And I knew how to navigate what I was needing from you, because I was able to clear the lines. Okay, he's telling me this as a friend. He's telling me this as an owner. He's telling me this as a coworker. And so the communication changed, and it just made it so much clearer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it created a lot of space. I think it creates a lot of space for growth.
Yes.
You know, especially if you're hiring one of your kids, or as you say, it's a husband-wife team.
Yeah.
And we've had other husband-wife teams on our, you know, and I remember one time, you know, we had another husband-wife team, and, you know, they were just very affectionate, and he'd come in and be affectionate to his wife, who was a director, and he was a manager. And I said to him one day, would you do that to any other director in the company? And he goes, no. And I said, okay, you're wearing the wrong hat. You're mixing hats. Here, she is the director of the company, and you have to act like you're not married. You know, even if you're reporting to her, you can come back, which is a bad idea. But even if you're reporting to a spouse, that's not a great idea, but sometimes it happens. But then you come home and you act like you don't work together, and you can complain about your terrible boss. Who happens to be the person you're talking to.
Yeah.
So I think that it just creates an opportunity to be able to come home, talk about work in a way you would speak to a spouse if you didn't work together. I think that's the rule of the hats, right? You have to act like the other hats don't exist when you're wearing the one.
Yeah.
Because you have to say, you know, this happened at work, and you have to act as though if you both work at the same company.
Yeah.
So I think it is a key to, as you said, a key to a family-run business.
Yeah. I think the other beauty part of it, I think what it expands also, especially with a team of leaders, and being willing to let somebody go before you, even if you would do it differently, really honoring and valuing that, especially if it's someone new taking the lead, because then they get to really learn to trust their team members, number one. But in that process, what happens is that you get to see how they're uniquely made in that situation, and they get to experience that. You know, you and I are very different. We follow the same God, and, you know, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but he addresses us very differently, because he wants to train us differently for a different outcome. And so I think that's one of the beauties. It's like, you know, I always say with Deborah and with Esther, it was the same God. It was the same foundation. However, he had to train them differently because they had a different calling on their life, so it required a different outcome. And I think it's really important for people to recognize, what is the outcome? What are you teaching me? What do I need to learn so that I get to this outcome? And as a team member, to really allow that person to walk in their anointing, their authority, and to practice that is such a beautiful experience to have in a business, when you really honor and value someone's position and the way that they learn and what they carry. And I think what happens then is that it cuts out the competition and comparisons. So then you can rest in who you are, knowing I will never be a Dionne. And I'm so thankful for Dionne, for what Dionne does. But I'm also thankful for what I do and how I do that. So it really gives you, I think, a greater appreciation of who somebody is. And it helps you to embrace and place a higher value on those differences than try and compare yourself to them or compete against them.
You know, this is such a kingdom mindset when we're talking about this, because it's seeing what the Lord's doing in someone else, seeing the treasure in them, cooperating with him to bring that treasure up in them. And, you know, who doesn't want to work for a boss who has a higher opinion of them than they have of themselves?
Exactly.
I mean, that's very compelling, you know, as long as it's not exaggerated or manipulative, because that can be, you know, that can be just flattery. But we're not talking about worldly things. We're talking about, from a kingdom viewpoint, Lord, how do you see this person, and what are you making them into, and how can we best train them?
Yeah.
Which infers something really interesting, because that means that you are not just taking the business forward, you're also bringing the team forward. Where we said in the beginning of the call, where do you want to, you don't want to just deliver the product, you want to upgrade the team.
Yeah.
So that's So talk to me a little bit as how does your partnership with the Lord work and influence your decision making and your leadership in general?
Well, I am very simple minded. So for me, how my partnership really works with the Lord is in every new situation, it really is, what does this mean? What must I do? And I always take everything to him in a childlike state because I know that, well, there's different stages of growth and development in the Lord. But when I'm doing something new and it's difficult, I always come to him as a child because I know that what I need to walk through is going to be maybe a little intimidating or scary or frustrating, difficult, all of that stuff. And I'm going to need to trust him differently in a different way that I've never needed to. And so I'm going to start there and then practice that and grow up into it. There's other areas in my life where God just says, Theresa, you're an adult, and for where I want to take you, you need to do this. I need you to get this because for where I want to take you, you have to master this. So I think it depends on the difficulty and the situation that I'm in. I would say more so than not, well, that's not true. I was going to say more so than not, it feels like I'm more in that child state because this has been such a huge learning curve for me. But there are times where I am a mature adult and he expects me to wear the hat as an adult woman and an adult kingdom woman because he has prepared me to represent him well. In other areas, I'm learning how to represent him better. So I think that in any business, you're always going to be doing jobs that you are qualified for. And he expects us to respond as a mature son and daughter and to wear that hat and to represent him well. But if you're growing something, you're doing something new, then he actually requires us to come back down and sit in his heart and be a small child and say, I know this is going to be difficult, but you will get through it. You've had bumps, bruises, and scrapes before. You're going to get a few along the way, but you're going to grow through it. And so when you do that, then you learn that you can trust the process. And I think that's the important of it. The importance is when you start using kingdom tools over secular tools, it empowers you in every situation. And you feel bigger. The more that you practice those tools, it empowers you. You get bigger, you get more confident, you get more sure of yourself, and you can run further, faster, and you can grow into an acceleration. And that's just the way the Lord does it. He multiplies everything. It's not always just one step at a time. It might be one or two steps, but then once you're up and walking, he's like, okay, let's go. So.
No, I do love that. I was thinking, well, what you're saying again, we're back to the hats. God gives you hats to wear, right? And he says, okay, yes, your daughter hat. Now step up. Oh, it's okay. Yes, your child hat. I'm in it with you. I'll teach you. I'll be with you. I'll hold your hand.
Yeah.
I'll go with you and strengthen you. Yeah.
Well, and it's the same thing with children in school. You wouldn't do algebra with a preschooler, right, but you would start math with a preschooler, and everything builds on each other. And as you grow in school, the teacher's job is to step back more and more because they should be fully confident that your foundation has been built. Now they're ready to give you the next building block. And that's the same thing with growing up with God when you're learning something new. So you're right. There's different hats.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think what I love about that is what ties up so beautifully with scripture is we're sons and daughters. And the word sons literally is huios, which is the mature believers. It's the same word the Lord says that he gives the kingdom to sons, to the mature. He doesn't give it to babies. You don't give a baby a Ferrari. Exactly. You love that your 5-year-old thinks they can ask for a Ferrari. That's a blessing. Yep, I love that you thought you could ask, but no Ferrari. But we can work towards the Ferrari, right? So exactly. I love that. And I also love that we never graduate out of being children. And so we are children of God and we're sons and daughters. So we always have both those hats. We never get past obedience on the one hand. And on the other hand, he treats you like a mature person and says, so Theresa, what do you think? What do you want to do? So, Father, what should I do? And he said, what do you want to do? And he relies, and we know his heart so well that we are choosing correctly.
Yeah.
So I do love that. I do love that.
Yeah.
And so how does that for you? Can you tell us a story or an example of where you struggled through this process? An example where you had to navigate a difficult situation in the business, and how maybe it was even an extended period of time where you had to kind of really walk through something with the Lord. And there were maybe even a time there was no outward signs that anything was going to change or be fixed, and yet you just had to stay in the Father's heart. Can you share a situation like that?
Yeah, we've had situations that have been really, really difficult, and it seems like there was never going to be resolve in it. And one of those, and we've all had these times where you're seeing something that someone else may not be seeing. And so you aren't being heard and listened to. And so the question is, okay, who am I going to be in this situation? Father, who do you want to be for me in this situation? Because if you make all things beautiful, there's that word beautiful again, whether you're a man or a woman, you got to find the beauty in who Jesus is,
Right.
because that keeps you beautiful, and it keeps you soft, and it keeps you tender. And so this was a situation that was incredibly painful and incredibly hurtful. And honestly, I had every right to just throw my hands up and tell people how I felt. But the Father said, Theresa, I'm trusting you in this process. And I was like, okay, who do you want to be for me right now that I've never needed you to be? Because this is what I want to do, but this is what you're asking me to do. So I didn't know how to do what he wanted me to do. So I had to ask him what he wanted to give me. And this is where that childlike, keeping it simple works, because when I found out the gift that he wanted to give me to walk through in this process, a piece of his nature, which actually was gentleness. I've been walking with kindness for years, but I just felt like he was saying gentleness. I just figured I walked with gentleness, but really gentleness is like friends by association, Mm-hmm. And so it took me probably a 3-year process of walking with gentleness. And it was difficult. It was hard because it was not a gentle situation. But the Father was so gentle with me that I was able to walk that out. There still hasn't been 100% resolve, but this is the beautiful part of it. There has been resolve in the big picture, but the beautiful part about it is who I became in the process of it.
Right.
So I think if people can grasp that every situation in our life is meant to have an encounter with God and who he is and his nature, he will give you a promise. He'll give you a picture. He'll give you a word. He will give you something to hang on to. And that then creates a resting place. It's where you grow. It's where you get healed. It shields you. It empowers you. It strengthens you. It builds you up. You start out like just resting. And by the end of it, you're empowered and you're ready to go. And so the beauty of walking through those difficulties again is, Father, what do you want to do in this situation? I'm totally aware of what the enemy is wanting to do. I'm totally aware of what this other person is wanting to do. But I want to know what you want to do, and I want to partner with that. Who do I need to become so that I stay in the partnership through the process to the end? And I don't want to ever be one of those people that just get to the other side. I want to take God for everything that he has for me. I want every promise, provision. I want all the authority and territory that he has for me, because I know that when I get to the other side, I'm going to have new territory, which then I get to open the doors and invite other people into that. And that's that kingdom. It's not me. It's the kingdom. And so when you can get outside of you, especially as a business owner, I might be a business owner, but I'm not the most important person in my business in terms of the facilitating of a business. We're all important in different areas. We're a team. So if you can get outside of your own self and see it bigger, the kingdom is so big that everything has to be bigger than you. So are you willing to be bigger than yourself? And if so, then you need to let the Father show you who he wants to be for you in those difficulties, so
Yeah.
that you get empowered and you grow bigger.
I love that. You just gave, for those listening to this, you just gave people a way to thrive in a toxic environment.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Because,
Yeah.
there was an element of toxicity to the process, to the situation you were describing. And it had huge potential for your demise, for your hurt, which is, I think, was what it was designed to do, right? The enemy was not looking to elevate you or enhance you, and yet the Lord flipped that, because that's what happens in the kingdom. What's designed to hurt you, God used to bless you. What's designed to curse you, he turns to for your good.
Yeah.
So, I think that was such a powerful key, because you reacted in the opposite spirit, really.
Yeah. But I did that because God never speaks to my behavior. So I don't want to speak to someone else's behavior. Do I need to address the behavior? Yes. But I want to see that person the way that Jesus does. The same time when maybe I'm not doing something the right way, and he's going to be gentle and kind with me. And when you walk in the goodness and the kindness of God, it'll always turn your heart. And so even how we relate to hurtful people, it's if you can do it through the lens of speaking to the treasure. And that doesn't mean you just turn the other cheek. There were definitely things that had to be addressed, but they had to be worn with different hats. As a coworker, we need to work on this. As a friend, I'm so sorry you're going through this, and I place too high a value on who I am in Jesus to allow this to continue in our relationship, because there's a better relationship to be had. And this is the relationship I want to have.
But there are people, right? In your experience in leadership, there are people, no matter how much space you give them, no matter how much you serve them, there are people who fundamentally have still a long journey to go, that where the organization is going right now will actually hurt them to stay in it. So then there's time to release them back into the marketplace, to go to an environment where they're not always feeling left behind, where they're always feeling they're not keeping up.
Yeah.
So how do you balance that? And at what time do you say, okay, time out, we need to end this. We've come to the end of the road. What for you, what's in your experience? When do you get to that point? You know, because obviously you don't give up people immediately, but there are some people just keep taking no matter what you give.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think something that's really important as a leader and just as a human to realize is that not everybody wants to grow.
Yes.
Not everybody wants to be set free. Some people really, and that makes my heart very sad, that not everybody wants to choose the better thing. And what we find is when people don't want to grow and they don't want to choose the better thing, then we start seeing all of the negatives. It's their fault. It's their fault. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. We see the lack of responsibility and all those things that come with that. And so, we give people every opportunity. We move them positions. We let them design their own positions because we want to see them flourish. Maybe it's just because that person's in the wrong position. So what position do you want? Let's help you develop that. Let's figure out where you can thrive. And then at some point we just need to clearly you are not happy here, and we bless you to go. And because we want you to be happy wherever you work. And I'm sorry we aren't a great fit for you, but clearly we aren't, because you are not growing and thriving in your job. And we don't want anyone to not thrive in their job.
Yeah.
And whether it's a job issue or if it's a character issue, that's really the Father's responsibility to address that. When it's our responsibility is to protect our business. We protect our business. We protect the people in our business, and we value the people in that, and that's our culture. So if people are pushing against that culture and trying to break that culture up and create a different culture, it's clearly time for you to go, because number one, you don't value the culture and you obviously don't want to grow into that culture. So you're free to move on.
Yeah, no, I get, because what we're talking about here in this part of the conversation is that there are situations where it's not that they're not growing, it's that they're growing so slowly. It's like they're at one pace and the company's at another pace and the gap's getting bigger and bigger. And the kindest thing is to just, set them free. Or you can sometimes have the opposite issue where the person in your team is growing faster than the company's growing. And then if you can't keep making space for them, like, hey, let's redesign the position for you. But then I think there are situations where, as you said, you have to protect the business, that the behavior is now destructive. Even Paul said, there were two reasons to separate people from a church context, this is the apostle of grace speaking, Paul, and he said, well, sexual immorality, and he explains why that's so destructive. But the other one was divisiveness. In fact, he said, if somebody refuses to stop being divisive, then you shouldn't even eat with such a person, which is brutal from the apostle of grace. So if it works in the kingdom, the issue is there are some people where we just have to hit the stop button and say, we're done, we're good. And I think for a lot of Christian or kingdom leaders, they think letting someone go is unkind, but sometimes it is the kindest thing. I think it's how you let them go. Hey, you got 30 days, the way we do it, right? You got 30 days. In 30 days, we're going to measure this. If that's not here, you need to have your resume in order, and we'll bless you as you go. Or you can go today, or we can upgrade this. And it's amazing to me that because some people think that's so harsh, but it's actually the kindest thing, not just to protect the business, but for the person. But you've been running the company. You guys have been running Brilliant, and it was a book house before, and then it grew. But for it's quite a lot, many years. I was trying to quickly calculate it. What is that? About 17 years, 16, 17 years, whatever the business has been going.
Years.
Yeah, 20 years. So but several, 1.5 to 2 decades long. But I'm sure you've seen that the team who started are rarely the team that finish it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So talk to me about those transitions, because you even transitioned yourself into a different role. So that was pretty big of you.
Yeah, I've transitioned into a few different roles for sure.
Yeah.
I think every business does. I mean, even in church world, who you start out with is not really who you finish with. And so I think that ties in with what you were saying, because sometimes people just outgrow their role. Sometimes you reach someone's ceiling. I mean, that's really key. When you've hit a place where you're frustrated and you feel stuck, you have to ask yourself, have I hit the ceiling here, or do I need to break through the ceiling? And it's important to know the difference. And it's the same thing you were talking about. Has that person hit their ceiling? It's really kind to relieve them of that, because it may not, it's their heart's there, but you really have reached that ceiling. So we have gone through, honestly, we've had some people, we've always had a very small team and have gotten a lot done. I think with restructuring, some people have just decided, have said, I love the business, I love the people, but this is not the structure that I can fit in. I'm feeling confined. I need to move outside. And they've been released to go do that. And other people have felt like, that all of the above. They've either hit their ceiling, they've outgrown the position, or they're not right for the position. And I think it's really normal and it's okay. It's like with friends. Every friend you make is not to be your best friend for the rest of your life. Relationships ebb and flow. And we've had some people that work for us and they've left and they've come back and then they've left again. And so, I think it's okay to let people come and go. And so we've always had a fairly small team, and we've gotten a lot done. So
because you can, and there are those people who are so sweet, who are so committed to you, who are so relational. They serve past their point of highest loyalty, meaning they stay beyond their point. They should have been there purely out of loyalty.
Yeah. We
And
don't want to.
and you serve, you just serve beyond that point. Your loyalty takes you too far. I think we've all done that, and
Yeah.
to some degree that's not the worst thing, but
Yeah.
as a leader it's important to recognize when someone's doing that.
And to let people do that. I think that's being a good leader, is not hanging on to everybody and then making them feel guilty or shameful because
Yeah.
they aren't fitting in anymore.
Right.
If something's not working, it doesn't mean that something's wrong. It means that something is missing. Can we help you find what's missing so you can fully engage and enjoy the process? Or is what's missing outside of Brilliant? And
Mm.
people have to decide that. Some people don't want to decide that because they don't want to answer that question. And sometimes we've had to decide that for them, clearly, because we've given them pieces, and
Right.
it hasn't worked for them, and they don't know what they need. And
Right.
that becomes their process, that they and their journey. And I think honoring people's journey and their free will and their free choice to go figure it out is, like you said, it's very kind and very gracious. And we do it very graciously here, because it's not a criticism if you don't work. It's just time. And we
Yeah.
want you to go find what works for you.
And I think it helps people maybe to know a bit more of the context here, because at Brilliant, I know that anybody who arrives at Brilliant goes through a pretty rigorous interview process, because the company invests so heavily in them, in their spiritual walk, their practical tools, their leadership tools. And so if they leave Brilliant, the goal is always that they'll be the smartest person in the room wherever they go. They've been taught the best practices, they've been taught the best skills, they've been taught, and it takes a tremendous investment on behalf of the company. So with that context, then if somebody's still not growing, still not adapting, then I think it's a lot easier in Brilliance context to quickly identify who's running. And of course, with all the help, some people just need a little moment to catch their breath, and then they're up to speed again,
Yeah.
and they're good to go. So, well, I would love to give you the last word in this. So let me ask you, one of my favorite questions is, what do you know that you know that you know about the Lord and what he's like? What is your testimony of the Lord?
So many things. I think that the goodness and the kindness of God, I know the Bible says it leads us to repentance, which really is the turning of our heart, that in every situation, that the goodness and the kindness of God will turn our heart in the direction that you need to be in every situation and in every difficulty. And he will always, and if you can just in those really difficult times, find his goodness, find his mercy, find his joy, find something of his nature, it really will be a lamp unto your feet. And it really will provide for you the steps that you need to either walk through or walk out. Because I think it's like everything we're talking about, it's really important to know, am I walking into something, or do I need to be walking out of something? And so it's really important to know that. And when you can ask the Father, who do you want to be for me right now that I've never needed you to be? And because when you know who you get to be in a situation, then you'll know how to be in the situation. So when you know who the Father wants to be and you say, okay, who do I need to become? Then you know how to be in that situation. And so I just think it's the goodness and the kindness of God that constantly turns our heart back to him, so that we can get outside of ourselves. And really, he's a good, good, good Father. And he will always make a way for us. And he will always give us whatever it is that we need that will be a lamp unto our feet and show us the way forward, so that we don't feel stuck and we don't feel under life circumstances. And then you can rise above those. So for me, it's always the goodness and the kindness of God, because that's who he's always been for me since the day that I met him. And that's who he's been for me in many more things, in every difficulty of my life. The first thing I do is I go to the goodness and the kindness of God and say, I know you're good. Even though the situation isn't good, even though this doesn't feel good and it hurts really bad, it doesn't matter. I don't even care if it's excruciatingly painful. God, you are good, and I want to find the goodness in this situation, because you said that you never leave me and forsake me. So where is your goodness in this situation? So
I love that. Theresa, it's been such a joy and a pleasure as always. I appreciate our friendship, appreciate who you are in the kingdom. Thank you for all you do at Brilliant Perspectives. For those who want to know more, you can go to brilliantperspectives.com, learn more about what Brilliant is doing, Theresa and Graham and their organization, but also I think soon there'll be brilliantmovement.com. That's, I think, a site coming up, but we'll drop it in here because it'll probably be up by the time we post this. So thank you for coming and sharing with us, sharing your life, sharing your experience and your walk with the Lord with us. We really enjoyed it. Thank you.
thank you, Dionne. I appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you'd like to hear more of this kind of content or submit a question for us to answer live, visit us at dionnevanzyl.com or click the link in the episode description. As always, thanks for listening.